Alright, so today I have for you the next installment in Epic History TV's Napoleon series, Napoleon's Revenge, Wagram, 1809. So let's go ahead and dive right in.
An Epic History TV History March collaboration. In May 1809, the Austrians had defeated Napoleon's army in the bloody Battle of Aspern. His enemies took heart. After years of French military dominance, it seemed the tide was turning at last. 3 weeks later, Pope Pius VII excommunicated Napoleon for annexing papal land. Another propaganda coup for his enemies. But in the wake of its victory, Austria hesitated, not sure whether to seek peace or continue the war, while Napoleon responded with a hurricane of activity. He summoned reinforcements to join him near Vienna, the Army of Italy under his stepson Eugène de Beauharnais, and 11th Corps under Marshal Marmont, who'd together driven Archduke John's Austrian army out of North Italy, as well as Marshal Bernadotte's Saxon 9th Corps. Napoleon's army grew from 90,000 to a massive 164,000 men and 544 guns, to take on Charles's army of 128,000 and 414 guns. 6 weeks after his first attempt had ended in defeat, Napoleon ordered his army to cross the river once more. This time his engineers had built solid bridges across the Danube to ensure there was no repeat of the disasters of Aspern. For the French army, Napoleon declared, the Danube no longer exists. The stage was set for the largest battle yet seen in European history. If you think our Napoleon series has made you a master of tactics and strategy, put your skills to the test in Vikings War of Clans, generous sponsors of this. Support the channel and get a special bonus of On the evening of the 4th of July, in heavy rain, the French began crossing from the island of Lobau, not towards the devastated villages of Aspern and Essling, but east towards Groß-Enzersdorf, which was soon ablaze from French shells. Archduke Charles had left only a small advance guard to delay the French. By dawn, General Massena's 4th Corps and Oudinot's 2nd Corps were driving those troops back, winning space for the French army to deploy. At 1 p.m, Napoleon was ready to begin his advance across 6 miles of flat cornfields towards the main Austrian position, an escarpment known as the Wagram, 100 meters behind the Russbach stream. As General Lasalle's light cavalry and Massena's 4th Corps swung left to guard the flank, Oudinot's 2nd Corps and Davout's 3rd Corps advanced towards the Wagram. Bernadotte's Saxon Corps and Eugène's Army of Italy filled the centre. At 6 p.m, unsure of the enemy's strength, Napoleon ordered a full-scale assault against the Wagram plateau. But his troops met determined Austrian resistance along the line. By dusk, the Saxon 9th Corps had pushed into the village of Deutsch Wagram. The Saxon infantry wore white uniforms, like the Austrians, and as darkness fell, were mistaken for the enemy and fired on by friendly units. The Saxons panicked and fled with heavy losses. Napoleon's attempt at a quick breakthrough had failed. That night, both armies slept in the open, while Charles and Napoleon planned their next moves. On the second day, Napoleon planned for Davout's 3rd Corps to lead the attack, rolling up the Austrian flank, while his other corps pinned down the enemy with local attacks. But to the Emperor's fury, he learned that overnight, without orders, Marshal Bernadotte had withdrawn his battered Saxons from Aderklaa, which the Austrians now occupied. Aderklaa was a crucial strongpoint in the centre of the battlefield. Napoleon gave orders for its immediate recapture, but the French and Saxon attack failed, with heavy losses. The Austrians had their own problems. Archduke Charles, knowing he faced a superior enemy, had decided his only chance of victory lay in an all-out dawn attack. He was relying on his brother, Archduke John, reaching him with 13,000 reinforcements, in time to support the attack on the left. But by dawn, there was still no sign of him. What's more, as 4th Corps began its assault on Grosshofen, on time, 3rd Corps, which had received its orders late, was still getting into position, holding up the entire Austrian right wing. Charles had to tell 4th Corps to abort its unsupported attack until the other corps were ready. With the Austrians paralysed by delays, at 10 AM, Davout began his attack. A fierce infantry battle erupted in the village of Markgraf Neusiedl, while in the fields, dragoons and hussars fought a giant whirling cavalry battle, as each side tried to outflank the other. Davout's corps took the village, though they couldn't stop the Austrians withdrawing to a strong new position on the Wagram escarpment. Meanwhile, a serious threat had developed to Napoleon's left flank and rear. Klenau's 6th Corps had driven back the outnumbered French, with some units advancing as far as Essling, dangerously close to Napoleon's vital river crossings. Napoleon urgently needed to reinforce his left flank, but he was also determined to hold back his reserves for a decisive attack. So he ordered Massena's 4th Corps to march across the battlefield and reinforce the left. A huge redeployment like this, right in front of the enemy, was high risk. So Marshal Bessieres was ordered to lead a cavalry attack straight against the enemy centre. Casualties were high. Even Marshal Bessieres had his horse killed under him, to the alarm of his men. But the enemy was kept busy, while 4th Corps completed its redeployment and forced Klenau's corps to fall back. Napoleon now assembled a grand battery of more than 80 cannon in the centre of the battlefield. This was one of Napoleon's trademark tactics, the concentration of artillery to blast the enemy line and pave the way for a decisive French attack. The Grand Battery fired an estimated 15,000 rounds, setting light to the cornfields. Around 1 PM, Napoleon ordered a general attack. As Davout continued to batter at the enemy flank, 4th Corps would advance on the left, 2nd Corps on the right, while in the centre, General MacDonald would lead forward 8,000 men of the Army of Italy, formed up in a giant three-sided square to secure his flanks. But despite the terrible French cannonade, Austrian 3rd Corps and Grenadiers of the Reserve met the French advance with torrential fire. MacDonald's giant square was cut to pieces, its men mowed down en masse by cannon fire, and the attack stalled. But the Austrian army, battered by relentless French attacks, was near breaking point. Every part of the line was under pressure from the French. Archduke Charles, determined above all to keep his army intact, ordered a retreat. The Austrian withdrawal was disciplined and well executed. Napoleon had his victory. But his army was also so shattered by fatigue and heavy losses, it was unable to launch any effective pursuit. The Battle of Wagram was a brutal slugging match. biggest and bloodiest battle yet seen in European history. French victory came at unprecedented cost. An estimated 37,500 casualties against 41,500 Austrian. 4 days later, French troops caught up with the retreating Austrians at Znaim. As the fighting escalated, Charles knew he could not withstand the French a second time, and asked for a ceasefire. But he had not consulted his older brother, Emperor Francis, who was furious when he heard the news, not least because long-awaited British support was finally on the way. 3 weeks after the Battle of Znaim, the largest amphibious force Britain had ever assembled, 35 ships of the line and 39,000 troops, landed at Walcheren Island on the Scheldt estuary. Its aim was to destroy French shipping and naval stores. But following the successful bombardment and capture of Vlissingen, British commanders let the initiative slip from their grasp. Their force was bottled up by French troops on the marshy Dutch coast, where it was decimated by fever and dysentery. About 4,000 died. Many more became permanent invalids. The survivors were evacuated back to England in December. Emperor Francis, informed of the British debacle and persuaded by his generals that Austria couldn't fight on, made peace with Napoleon. In October, Austria signed the Treaty of Schönbrunn, giving up territory to the French Empire, Bavaria, Saxony, the Duchy of Warsaw, and Russia. In total, the Austrian Empire was stripped of 3.5 million subjects, forced to pay an indemnity, limit its army to 150,000 men, and join Napoleon's continental system, which meant ending all trade with British ships and merchants. Archduke Charles, meanwhile, one of Napoleon's more skilled opponents, had fallen out so bitterly with his brother, Emperor Francis, that he never held active command again. Napoleon had won another crushing victory, but there were worrying signs for the French Emperor. His enemies were learning, while he would increasingly have to rely on young conscripts to fill the gaps left by veterans killed or wounded on campaign. Few could have guessed in 1809, but Napoleon had just fought his last victorious campaign. You can now support Epic History TV.
Yeah, so this is a very important battle because at the end of it, it appears that Napoleon is going to be completely victorious in Europe. There's really no one left to openly oppose him. You have the British, but they don't have the means to actively fight him on the ground, except in Iberia, which we will see in the next video when I talk about Spain. But this battle was so bloody too, so it was a huge victory for Napoleon because it brought Austria back under his heel. And Austria faced very harsh terms of peace, which is, you know, a recurring theme in European military history. But despite the big win, it came at such a cost that it was really very hard for Napoleon to turn around and win another huge victory like that. As I said, they had to fill in the gaps with conscripts. He lost so many men, so many veteran men that had fought in many battles, and had been trained so well that suddenly he's just recruiting, young men, many of them in their teens, to take their spot. But he didn't have as much time to train them as properly, especially with the war in Spain going on. He was sending a lot of troops down that way. So he's trying to fill in the gaps that he lost at Wagram and at the same time fight in Spain as resistance there grows and grows over the next few years. So he's having to continue to send more troops and reinforcements into Spain, and even send more armies as things get worse. At the same time, rebuild the forces that he has lost, and he's already planning to go on further, so he's trying to build his army up to be even larger than it was before Wagram, which means he brings in a lot of very inexperienced young men, and that is not good for Napoleon. The thing with the rest of the European countries, especially Austria and Britain, is they come along and they have troops that are seasoned and well trained. By this point, they have figured Napoleon out. They are adapting to his strategies. They are figuring out how he operates. They are taking some of Napoleon's doctrines and adapting them to their own army. They are not the pushovers that they were some years ago. Just a few years prior to this, really, they weren't the pushovers that they were before. I mean, Austria at this point gave Napoleon a huge fight, and this is after he had just lost a battle, when the first fight against the Austrians was, not even much of a contest. Napoleon came with a landslide victory. His enemies, they knew how to fight him. They'd figured it out. They knew how to fight him. They hadn't quite figured out how to beat him consistently, but they knew how to fight him. And that was important. That was an important step in bringing Napoleon down. And we'll see that in future battles, that what they are learning here from even their losses is extremely important, because by the end of it, they are fighting like Napoleon. Not the best that they can. They are fighting like Napoleon. They are no longer fighting with the old tried and true methods that they were before. They are now fighting with the new doctrines and the new systems of organization. So this is very bad for Napoleon, So this victory is huge for him, and it feels good about it. But at the same time, he's doing this, but he's got one eye looking at Spain. As the situation there continues to deteriorate, he's looking at he's got Britain breathing down his throat, and they're consistently trying to find ways to take him down. They tried a naval invasion and failed, but they are actively fighting in Portugal and Spain. They are supplying anyone who's going to fight against Napoleon. They're supplying and training them, despite what they may feel about them personally. The British didn't hold some of these other countries' militaries in very high regard, but if you're fighting Napoleon, you're going to get British support. Plain and simple. So yeah, this was a huge victory for Napoleon, but as I said, it's his last major victory. He does go on and win more. He does go on and get some serious wins under his belt, but none of them have the same massive outcome. So in this, the outcome of this battle brings Austria down. Never again does he have a victory that does that. Never again does he have a victory that brings a country completely down. So that's really the big change. It's not that he doesn't have more victories, he absolutely does, but you'll never again see him take a country down with a big, huge battle like this. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and end the video there. If you like the video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.